Konbanwa, and welcome back after a lengthy interruption to Critics and Cars Getting Home.
Tonight we're on the way home from seeing The Creator. Now we didn't get to go to the media preview because we were in Japan. So we took ourselves...
That's my fancy introduction.
That's hence konnichiwa and konbanwa. But anyway, so we've just seen The Creator, and we went to see it in VMAX because having seen the trailer enough times, we knew that it was going to be big and spectacular. Having listened to some of the reviews, we knew that it maybe wasn't going to be an amazing film, but that it was still going to be a good-looking film. So I'm glad to say that we did see it big.
And so what did you think of it, having had your expectations set at a certain level?
I expected to like it more than I actually did, as in appreciate it more. It was enjoyable, but my gosh, there's a lot wrong with it. And yet, the things that are right with it are so right with it. Like, I feel as though it does some things, unfortunately more stylistic, superficial things, but I feel like it does those things better than anything I ever see. But, yeah, what do you reckon?
I might be slightly the other way around on that equation, but I agree that there's a lot wrong with it. I'll be interested to see what you think is or isn't wrong with it. I can't improve on a review that I read beforehand that said it felt like Netflix had bought the rights to some science fiction thing, made an 8-hour miniseries, and then it got chopped down into 133 minutes.
Now, 133 minutes is a long time, and I knew that it was that long, and I have to say, one of the things I did find interesting, and I'm not the editor in the car right now, guys, as I think you know he is, but it did seem to me that it was very, very efficient. It was expedient in the way that it got to that 133 minutes, but I feel that it was at the expense of a lot of depth and development and interest, and I found that scenes felt to me very clipped, and that they'd move on, and there were heaps of elisions in time and things, which in a way is kind of good, but...
And let's just step back for anyone who might not even know what The Creator is or know what we're talking about.
Right.
So The Creator stars John David Washington, last seen, I believe, in Tenet, or maybe one or two other movies since then.
You mentioned a Netflix film. He was in an appalling Netflix sort of sci-fi thing with some woman, and they were meant to be in love, and it was chemistry-free. And the only good thing about Tenet was that he didn't have to pretend to be in love with... who's the other person in Tenet?
Is it Elizabeth Debicki? No.
Or Kenneth Branagh, or any of them.
Yeah.
But anyway...
So anyway, John David Washington plays an undercover asset a few years after the AIs have race such as it is has detonated a nuclear bomb in Los Angeles, killing 1 million people.
2065.
2065 is when it said. Does it say when the bombing happened? Or
yeah, so 2065, the bombing had happened 5 years prior.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that we don't even really know. All I remember thinking when they put the date up on the screen is, it's in a realistic near future. But it's very much, to me, the look of the near future actually is a cross between Elysium and the District 9.
Right. So there's a mix of that, but also much through an Asian lens, because most of the film is set in what's called New Asia, which was filmed over 6 or 7 different Southeast Asian countries, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and so forth.
Yep.
And
this concept of New Asia it's nice. I would say that's part of the cleverness of it. The film is written and directed and produced and everything by Gareth Edwards, who is I think a wonderful young Welsh. I say young, he's probably my age.
He's
Welsh
not Welsh, is he? That's the other Gareth who did The Raid.
Oh, okay. Gareth Edwards, even though he has a Welsh name, might not actually be Welsh. But anyway, he made Monsters about 12, 13 years ago. A really indie film that was very, very well done. And then he did Rogue One.
He did Godzilla before that. So he did the 2014 version of Godzilla. And then, Monsters, which didn't have many monsters in it. Godzilla, which didn't have much Godzilla in it. Rogue One, which didn't have much Star Wars in it. And now we have The Creator, which doesn't have much of The Creator in it.
Yeah. That's true.
So he's got a brand as a creator. It's a strange film in that basically there's so much interesting world building
Yes.
around the edges,
I think the
and so
world
much
building is
philosophical
terrific.
detail,
Yeah.
and also some really thorny politics. I mean, I can't really get into them without spoiling the end, but Jesus, it at a superficial level, quite a provocative comment on American militarism and blowback and all that sort of thing.
Let's just say that in the two sides of this war, this future war
Yeah.
between the AI and the Americans, basically everybody gets called the American. And John David Washington is one of the Americans, and Alison Janney is one of the Americans. So it's interesting in that regard. It does feel as
Yeah.
though the world has been brought down to the USA versus New Asia, and there ain't nothing else.
Yeah, but whether there's elements of the world building that feel really developed and elements that don't, but basically John David Washington just wants to see his ex.
Yeah.
And it's of all the movies that people talked about it maybe evoking, and there's been no shortage of movies with ethical quandaries of AIs or future dystopias or whatever.
What do they mention?
Things like Blade Runner
Yeah.
come to mind, but I didn't expect Vertigo to be the movie that I thought of.
Right.
And I think there's a reason in Vertigo that Jimmy Stewart's character isn't also like trying to save the world while being obsessed with the woman he's in love with, who he thought was dead but is maybe alive.
And can I just say, and I don't mean to be unkind, I've kind of thought quite a lot lately about being a critic and being unkind about people working in the industry, but I just am not a great fan of John David Washington. I think his dad is Christmas, and I think what's interesting about his dad, Denzel, is Denzel doesn't have that many faces sometimes, and yet for some reason his performances are always compelling. Now John David Washington has even fewer faces. To my mind, he kind of has two, and one of them is the side eye. But I never get any kind of emotion or any kind of chemical feeling from him.
Yeah, and that's a problem in a movie that relies on it. I will say it's probably the least I've been annoyed by him as a lead in a film that I've seen.
Sure.
But he also, that very first scene that he has with Gemma Chan, where you establish their chemistry, it felt like there was something kind of real in that. And then his character is completely stripped away from that, and then so he seems to be given these sort of sad sack roles a lot of the time, and he just leans into that kind of one-noteness of it.
He's just, unfortunately for me, maybe it sounds like for you, not a great leading man.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he's what you've got in this. So I thought it was beautiful. This is not a spoiler if you've seen the trailers. I love the idea of this sort of futuristic world that has held on to elements that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
For example, the Buddhist monks in Asia, who are still wearing their orange gowns and everything, but you can see from the trailer that they are AI. They're not called replicants. What are they called?
Simulants or something like that?
Simulants,
Yeah.
that's right. And I thought, that's interesting. There's so much, as you say, philosophical or existential about it.
Even just ones about
is.
AIs getting high. Like there's a moment where like they've been like too busy smoking something or other to be awake when
And I
things
found-
happen. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
See, to me, there were sort of coherence issues, and there were also, and look, I don't consider myself particularly perceptive or challenging, or when it comes to like scientific sort of things. I tend to just go, oh yeah, okay. But I'm like, why would you develop an AI that needs to get drunk and fall asleep and can't be woken up? Why
Well,
would
the
you?
whole point is they develop their own will independently of their creator.
There
But-
just seem to be a lot of holes for me.
Oh, so here's my big hole.
All right.
Is that they can have lunar colonies.
Yes,
They
like
can
in Elysium.
They can have LAX, which actually works,
Oh,
and you can get
LA
on a flight and through. I mean, that's like probably the least plausible thing about the film is the idea that you can show up on LAX and be on a flight to the moon in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Magic Obi-Wan child that has powers to convince robots or not, but you can't. You can only do Google Translate through this really cumbersome thing, and our hero
Device.
spends literally 90 minutes barking up the wrong tree because he hasn't Google translated a word. Like, I felt like my interactivity with Google Translate in the country we just went to was more sophisticated than what we see in this movie.
Sure.
And that's just, it's just one of
Yeah.
those, like,
For me, I think, as I keep saying, the world building was stunning. The music is really beautiful, and it's a great looking film, but it didn't have any substance for me in terms of the performances. The child, again, not a spoiler, the child is gorgeous, glorious, and adorable, but but that's about it. It's kind of just like cute kid, but the rest of the performances are completely one note, and the plot and the dialogue, the scripting was so one note for me, and there were so many cliches of scenes, you know, including the love scene at the beginning and that sort of thing, and I was just a bit like, I'm left feeling empty. Is really what it's all about.
Whereas I guess I see all that and I agree with that, but I had such low expectations going in that it slightly exceeded it. And also, we haven't seen a movie on the big screen for a couple weeks now, so it's nice to be back to that. So, it's my favorite Gareth Edwards movie yet, but that's a real low bar to cross.
Oh, it's not mine. Monsters is mine.
Yeah, I wanted Monsters in mine. So I was really disappointed by it. But anyway, that's us, and you might see us again sooner than the last time you saw us, but we'll see about that. Take care.